Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I have a brand new video for you here today, and as you can tell by the title, it's going to be all of the books that I read in 2017. I read some good books this year and would love to tell you about them. So this all started actually in January, in late January. I was emailing with my friend Alyssa. She's a blogger also. I'll leave her blog and her YouTube down in the description box so you can check her out. And I was talking about how I wish that I could read more, which sounds silly because I'm a writer and editor for a living. I read all the time. But what I feel like I don't get to read all the time is actually like physical books and get to read them for pleasure, because I consume so many articles and I'm always reading things for work all the time, but I never seem to have time to just sit by myself and read a book, which is one of my favorite things to do. So I was talking to her about this in January, and she actually recommended this app called Goodreads, which I had never heard of. But with Goodreads, you can set a reading goal for yourself for the year. And my reading goal for this year was to read 15 books, which if you read a lot, that may not sound like a lot to you. I get it, but you know, in my spare time and after work, whenever I do have a quiet moment or even commuting on the train, that's kind of where I got these 15 books in, and I'm very proud of that. Well, I'm finishing up the last one right now, but I'm going to finish it by the end of the year, and I'll tell you all about it because I'm sure you're dying to know. So now that I have finished my ramble, because of Goodreads, basically I've met my reading goal for the year, and I hope that next year I can amp it up to probably either 20 books or maybe even 25 if I'm feeling adventurous. But yeah, just so quick shout out to Alyssa and to Goodreads for helping me read all the books that I got to read this year, so thank you. If you're new to my channel, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for clicking on to this video. I hope that you love it and that you'll subscribe and join my little internet family here on YouTube. So I split this into 3 categories. I have fiction, nonfiction, and sort of nonfiction with a career angle to it. A few of them are specifically career books, but a bunch of them are also memoirs where people who either worked at magazines or at digital publications, which is what my job field is, have written just books about their lives and ended up in a, you know, obviously talking about their work throughout the books. So if you're a fiction lover, this video has 15 books in it and only 2 of them are fiction, but I promise I will start with that. Let's jump into the first fiction book that I read this year. So this is Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld, and what I loved about this book was that it is a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice. I'm named after Jane Austen, as many of you know, so this was kind of an obvious choice for me to read. I thought that it was, at the end, it just felt like a tiny bit too long. Like, I obviously know how Pride and Prejudice ends, so I was kind of waiting and waiting, but this was such a fun read. It kind of takes Pride and Prejudice and, oh, and Lizzie and her sisters went to Barnard, if you didn't know that. So it was just fun to hear about her life in New York City, and then also her home, her family is based in Cincinnati, which is also funny because I got to go there this year. So I really enjoyed this book just because of its parallels and its overlaps with my life. But if you're looking for just something light and fun and kind of a different version of a story that you already know and may love, then I definitely recommend checking this out. Oh, and Chip Bingley is on this like Bachelor-esque game show, so there's lots of this, like the 2017 version of Pride and Prejudice. So if you're a Jane Austen fan or a Bachelor fan or a fan of New York, I think that you'll enjoy this book. So that was number 1. The second one I read, a few of these books are at my house in New Jersey, so I don't have a physical copy to show you, but I will always link everything down below in the description box that I talk about in my videos. So the second fiction book that I read this year was The Handmaid's Tale, and it may shock some of you to know that I have not yet watched the Hulu series. And I think that The Handmaid's Tale is just such an interesting and unique idea, and if you have any interest in the TV show, I think you'll really love the book. Or just in that concept in general. I tend to struggle with like dystopian futuristic books. I wasn't as big a fan of The Hunger Games as I thought I would be at first, and I think that's kind of where my block came in for Handmaid's Tale too. That's kind of a fun one to read just for right now because it is such a big kind of cultural talking point. So if you like fiction that also overlaps with real life and stuff that we're talking about right now, yeah, you'll definitely like The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, now moving on to nonfiction. So this is a book by Joan Didion that came out this year. It's called South and West, and as you may know already, Joan Didion is one of my favorite writers ever. I think probably The Year of Magical Thinking is one of my favorite books of all time, which may be a little strange just because it's about such a sad subject matter. It's about obviously the passing of her husband John, but her writing is just achingly beautiful. And what I loved about this was that it's kind of all unfinished works from notebooks that she kept when she and John took a road trip throughout the South and West of the United States. Because I associate Joan Didion so much with New York, but to hear her talk about these other places and in kind of like unfinished ways, I mean, her really edited and finished and thoughtful prose is obviously amazing too, but it's also interesting to see more of the process of her work. So if you're into that, you'll definitely love South and West. The next one kind of follows perfectly with the Joan Didion road trip book, and it's the book that I'm currently reading and I'm almost done with. Well, almost. I won't lie to you guys. If you can see, there is like where my page is marked down. But this is My Life on the Road by Gloria Steinem, and my friend Najette recommended this to me, so thank you for the recommendation. And I love Gloria Steinem, obviously. She's so cool. She's such a feminist icon, and it's been really interesting though I'm kind of still, okay, I'm gonna finish it, but in the early stages of her book when she's talking about her childhood, I guess I didn't realize to what extent, how nomadic her family really was. So it was so fun to read her stories of like stopping on roadside diners for food, and like her dad befriended all of these people, like little random people who ran roadside stalls along the way, and just how like she also has a little section about why she doesn't drive and how we can learn things from taxi drivers, and it's just such a great way of looking at the world. And now that I've just come back from Thailand, I feel that like tenfold, so this is the perfect book for me to be reading right now. But if you have any interest in Gloria Steinem or anything that she's done or traveling in general, this was, well, and still is, because I promise I'll finish it. I'm really enjoying it, so yeah, definitely put this on your list. The next one, I don't have a physical copy once again. Well, I do, but it's in New Jersey. Anyway, this is Anna Kendrick's book. It's called Scrappy Little Nobody, and I don't actually know that much about Anna Kendrick, or I guess I didn't when I first picked this book up, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. But it's really fascinating to me, and I think what she gets at in the core of her book is how easy it is for someone who's so in the middle of everything and who seems like so famous and so at the center of everything in Hollywood right now, like how much they can feel like an outsider. And it took her a long, long time to feel even remotely like she belonged. Like she would talk about, you know, when they were filming Twilight in Canada, I think it was, and people were coming to like stalk like Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, and then I think right after the first Pitch Perfect movie happened was when that was just starting to happen for her. I think this book had a lot of insights into her personality that you wouldn't get otherwise, so if you're kind of interested in reading what someone in Hollywood thinks about like the outside, I would definitely recommend Anna Kendrick's book. The next one that I want to talk about, which is kind of a similar setup to the book, is Lily Collins' book. It's called Unfiltered. I think it has a subtitle like No Shame, No Regrets, Just Me. And Lily Collins is, first of all, absolutely gorgeous. She's so awesome. She's Phil Collins' daughter, and she has been in the spotlight pretty much a lot of her life, especially just with her dad and everything. And she gets really, really real in this book. Like, I was like, oh, unfiltered, like, that's nice. No, this girl talks about so much. She talks about all of her heartbreaks and her struggles with food, but it's such a page-turning book. Like, I just wanted to like read more, and kind of, it felt like a good friend just coming over for an afternoon and spilling her guts out everywhere, just like retelling her whole life story, but in a very relatable and lighthearted way. So yeah, I definitely would say give that one a go if you're interested in Lily Collins or want to know more about her. Up next is Just Kids by Patti Smith, and this has been recommended to me so many times, and Sally finally lent me a copy of it over the summer, so I got to read it. Thank you again, Sally, for doing that. So Just Kids is Patti Smith's kind of first prose book, I guess, because she's obviously known for poetry and songwriting, and she really details her life in New York and her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe. So if you have any interest in books that are about like artists living in New York and like the 70s and 80s and the Chelsea Hotel and that kind of community, Warhol was also, you know, kind of involved in it, which is cool for me now working at Interview to hear. So it's just such a beautifully told story, and even like describing the grit and kind of the gross parts of like you first moved to New York and your first apartment, like she kind of still made all of it sound cool. So if you are interested in Patti Smith or like art and photography in general, I think that you would really enjoy this book. It's such every word is just like perfectly strung together, I thought. The next book that I'm going to recommend, we were actually just talking about this at interview because we were doing our year-end lists, and this made our top 10 and was actually number 2. It's Ariel Levy's The Rules Do Not Apply. And I forget who told me to read this, or maybe I just kept seeing it or hearing about it, but I downloaded it on the plane when we were traveling to Thailand, and I started it in Stockholm, and I think I finished it by the time we got to Bangkok, so like about 10 hours or so. Oh my god. This is just, it's such a crazy story, but told in such like a personal and kind of a very like observant way. Like, I don't think I could look at my own life and reflect on it as clearly as the author does in this one, but you know, she kind of goes through a lot of emotional turmoil and a lot of things changing over in her life, and it all happens all at once. And it's just like, to deal with one of those things would be kind of crazy, but to deal with all of them together is just almost unbelievable. And I remember like gasping out loud on the plane being like, oh my god, how did this just happen to her? I don't want to like editorialize her life in any way, but I think you should just read the book because I could kind of try to explain it as best I can. To hear the first person account of how everything unfolded is kind of the best way to hear about it. And if you also don't know, Ariel also wrote for the New Yorker, so that's kind of probably why I first found out about it, which was a connection to magazines and connection to other things I'm interested in. And speaking of that, I think that I'm going to shift into, I'm calling this the career section, and I realize the first book that I have to tell you about in the career section should sort of be like what not to do in your job, but if you know anything about 2017 and you know anything about what not to do at magazines, then you know I must be talking about Kat Marnell's book, How to Murder Your Life. And this was actually a big deal at Nylon because we wanted to review it for our, I think it was February books section, and our beauty editor ended up writing a book review of it because Kat Marnell was a beauty intern at Nylon back in the day. But you open the book and you're reading it and it's like, yeah, I would like organize Nylon's beauty closet after I did Adderall. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So it's kind of all about Kat Marnell's struggle with wanting to rise to the top ranks of being a beauty editor, and she worked at Lucky for a long time, and then she also went on to be a writer for XO Jane, but also her struggle with addiction. I think it's one of those instances where a lot of times from the outside you could think, oh, maybe this person like struggles with this and that, but like to actually read what's going on in someone's head while all of this is happening is crazy. And like, she knew she was kind of a hot mess, and she acknowledges that and is very self-aware throughout this book. Anyway, I loved reading about how like when she went from Nylon to, I guess it was Lucky, and she was like, oh my god, they got such nicer stuff here than they used to get at Nylon. And I'm just like, well, yeah, welcome to the world of indie publishing, girlfriend. It's kind of a crazy read, so if you're looking for something that may be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, told from kind of the perspective of an addict, it's very interesting, and I think Kat did a great job with her book. Okay, the next book that I wanted to talk about is The Big Life by Anne Choquette, and if you were a teenager growing up between, I guess, what, like 2008 and 2015 maybe was when she left 17, you've probably read something that Anne Choquette influenced because she was the editor-in-chief of 17 pretty much the entire time I remember getting it. I think someone else took over from her, like I said, in 2015. I'll fact check that and put it on the screen if I'm wrong. But I knew I wanted to read this book when I first found out she was writing one, and what ended up happily surprising me about this book was it wasn't just an editor's take on, you know, like being in charge of 17. What Anne Choquette does in this book is actually interview kind of focus groups of young women, so they could be ages like 14 through 24, but because she forms these focus groups, she can really kind of take the temperature of people my age and see what they're feeling about their relationships and their careers and their roommates and their families and what they want in their life, and how they can kind of come, like, bring all of those things together to create what she likes to call the big life. Like when you kind of feel like you've got it all figured out, you're taking things in stride, you're not, you know, at the lower level at your job anymore, you've really proven yourself, and kind of how it can all culminate into this big, beautiful, like, life that you create for yourself. So I thought it was really nice that she wasn't, you know, like, it wasn't all about her. She really used what she had been using as the editor-in-chief of 17, which was her readers, to kind of give her some insight into what young women are thinking about. It was just a very refreshing tone from an editor-in-chief type, but she's amazing, so definitely pick this up if that's something you're interested in. Next up is The Career Code, and this is by Hilary Kerr and Catherine Power, and you may know them as the co-founders of Who, What, Where, where my friend Lauren works. Shout out to Lauren. I'm so kind of fascinated by Who, What, Where and how it's become kind of a very established publication. It's kind of the ultimate blogger's dream to have a website that they kind of start out with, like thinking like, oh, this will just be for fun, or maybe this will help out a few people, to suddenly have it grow into this massive thing. So I was definitely curious to hear what they were going to say in their book, and the first thing I love about this is that there are kind of different codes in here, is how the chapters are laid out, and code number 1 is figure out what you love doing and get paid to do it, which is just anybody's goal, I think, in life. And I feel like that's a kind of great way to start out there, because from there they kind of advise you on how to work through like getting the most out of being an assistant, and through kind of creating your own content and figuring out what it is people want. So this is a very kind of more traditional like career book if you're looking for something more like that. And you're interested in websites or fashion or anything related, you might really enjoy this one. Okay. The next up is another one that I have a physical copy of, but it's home in New Jersey, so here, pretend I'm holding it. But it's I Shouldn't Be Telling You This by Kate White, who, as you may know, served as the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan for 14 years until 2012, super casual, and my mom also worked for her, and they worked together very closely for, however long they did. Sorry, Mom, I should know this. I should listen more. But anyway, I obviously was interested in reading this book of Kate's. She's written some fiction books as well, but I was interested in reading this career book of hers because of her experience at Cosmo, a brand which I've interned for when I was in college. So it's actually funny because I was reading this book right after I got laid off from Nylon, and so I felt like I had really just gained a lot of momentum at Nylon and was going in the right direction, and reading this book was really getting me revved up. And I remember getting laid off and just thinking like, oh my god, I don't even know if I can finish this book, because I thought everything was so set and so certain, and I felt like I was really on my way towards achieving a lot more there than I got to, and now I'm like, well, what do I do? I flipped ahead to the section about like when bad things happen, like when things go wrong. And I remember reading that, and it just like kind of calmed me down, because things can go wrong even when you're the top dog at your dream job and you think that everything is kind of all figured out. That's exactly when things can go wrong and fall apart. One of my favorite things about this book, and I promise this is not a spoiler, this does not ruin the book for you at all, also because it's nonfiction, so it's still ongoing, but she is talking about, you know, being editor-in-chief of Cosmo and starting kind of like juggling all of the different things that you have to do every day. She brought up this metaphor about draining the swamp. So say you're a field worker and your main job is to drain the swamp, but as you're trying to drain the swamp, like alligators keep popping up. So it's like, okay, there's an alligator, I have to fight it off right now. And you kind of forget that your whole point of you being there and doing the thing is to drain the swamp. So that's kind of a metaphor, obviously, for like your work day, and emails pop up from clients or from other writers or editors who are waiting for this about deadlines. But if your job is ultimately to kind of be there and help shape the voice of the magazine and kind of figure out like bigger long-term solutions, and they really want to use you and your big brilliant ideas, then you can't lose sight of that as you're trying to fight off the alligators. Like, you still got to drain the swamp at the end of the day. So what I really liked that she said was she set aside an hour a week just to think about like, what else could I be doing that's different? What needs to change about what we've been doing, what works, what doesn't work, like what kind of magazine and what kind of brand do we want to be? And I don't think enough people, myself included, really take the time to do that. So I definitely hope to employ that in, you know, this job that I have now. This is the penultimate book that I will be talking about, and I've wanted to read this for a while, so I'm glad I finally got to pick it up. And it's The Woman I Wanted to Be by Diane von Furstenberg. And this gives you such a cool, unique look into her life and where she came from and what her family was like. There's so many little details about it that I didn't know, like her mother being a Holocaust survivor and surviving Auschwitz, and her also, like them getting kind of picked out of their neighborhood. And she always throughout the book is like, I'm so grateful that like I'm still here and that I still have stuff to do. And I feel like that attitude, just, you can see it in her like obviously huge business that she's created, multiple businesses, because you, as you see in this, like some of them fail, some of them start out great and then they lose all their money, and then they find new investors, but then they have to sell it. Her writing is just like, it sounds like she's talking to you. It's so cool. I'm just like listening in my head to Diane von Furstenberg narrate this for me. If there was an audiobook where she read this out loud, and maybe there is, or maybe I just gave her the best idea ever and she should go do it, I would totally buy that. So this is Power You're Happy by Lisa Sugar, and she is the founder and CEO of Pop Sugar, which is one of the biggest websites out there for pop culture and celebrity culture, and also fashion, beauty, and wellness. So it was so interesting to kind of pick this up and get to like go online and see kind of, you know, looking at Pop Sugar now and then hearing how it started. It started when she just had this like kind of obsession with celebrities, and she would be like, you know, at a party and then go like to the bathroom and like type up on her phone, like type up the next article for the next morning. And you know, it got to the point where it was growing and growing and growing, so she couldn't keep up with it. And she now works with her husband, and she now has huge teams of people who work for her also, and she's based in San Francisco, and they also have a team in New York. So it's just such a fascinating, another kind of example of someone who kind of started out with this small website that was really just a passion of theirs and who suddenly grew it into this giant business. So I'm obviously a big fan of that concept and all of the work that they've done at Pop Sugar. And my favorite thing about this was I was reading it and I put it in my Insta story like currently reading, and I tagged the author also. So I tagged Pop Sugar, but I also tagged Lisa Sugar because, you know, that's a good tip too. If you want to get in touch with any brands or anyone that you're interested in talking to, you know, you can go straight for the website, or you can tag the editor or author or whoever directly. So Lisa actually sent me a message back and was just like, oh, like, I hope you're enjoying it. I had so much fun writing it. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, congrats on turning something that you're interested in into this huge business. And she was like, oh, thanks, like, always be persistent and like everything will work out. So it's kind of just one of those moments where it's like, am I talking to the woman who wrote the book that I'm reading? It was so cool, and she was so nice about it. So, you know, you never know. If you reach out to someone whose work you really like, you'd be surprised what they say when they hear that someone out there is reading it. Alright guys, and that is all the books that I read in 2017. I hope that you liked this kind of video. I haven't really done any books themed videos yet on my channel. I guess this would fall under like the lifestyle umbrella, but if you did like it, let me know. I'd be curious to hear if you want me to do more of these, or if you want me to do maybe book reviews, like if I read one specific book that you're interested in. Definitely let me know in the comments, and let me know if you do watch other kind of literature related videos on YouTube. If there's anyone out there who does an amazing job of doing them, I would love to watch. But thank you again for watching. I can't believe we're at the end of 2017 already. I hope this gave you some ideas of maybe new books that you might be interested in reading, or maybe it just inspired you to read a little more, which is nice also, because it's always good to just shut off your phone and kind of zone into a good book. Make yourself some hot chocolate, guys. It's gonna be a long winter. If you have any other questions that I didn't answer about any of these books, please let me know in the comments. And if you aren't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I put out a new video every week, and please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and I know to create more content like this video. And that's all for right now, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!